Good day. My name's Enrique Alvarez, and I'm here for another exciting episode of Logistics with Purpose. I'm here with my co-host Kristi Porter, and we have an incredible guest today. Kristi, how are you doing?
I am doing great. I'm excited to have this conversation. This guy is really busy, so it took us a while to get him on, but we know it is going to be worth the wait, and we're excited to have him. His name is Jorge Fontanez. He is the CEO at B Lab U.S. in Canada, and we are B Corp members as of just about a year ago. And so the first time you and I met him at the conference champions retreat last year, we have been continually impressed by him. So looking forward to this conversation. So Jorge, good morning. Welcome to the show. We're so glad you're here.
Hi, Kristi. Hi, Enrique. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for being patient with my schedule. But it's great to be here. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes, we're happy to. Well, of course, we're going to get into all things B. But before we get started, I want to ask you some quick questions. We'll warm
Okay.
up a little bit and just say the first thing that comes to your mind. So,
Okay.
what is one thing you do to stay productive?
Rest and run.
Oh, two opposite ends.
um,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the two go together in some ways. But that's my short answer.
Awesome. What's the last book that you read?
What It Takes to Heal by Prentice Hemphill. The subtitle is something like what it takes to transform the world. I think it's based a lot on the premise of Thich Nhat Hanh's like creating inner peace and how that then helps to create peace in the world.
Oh, I love that. We'll have to look into
Mm.
that. And finally, what is the best part of your job?
Oh, the community right here, like this.
Yeah.
We've doubled in size as a community since I've joined, now in my fourth year at B Lab, and it's every day I truly get to know a new leadership team from a B Corp that's joined, and that's always really satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
It's an
What?
exciting and vibrant community to be a part of, and we've only joined recently, as Kristi was saying. But you're absolutely right. It's just all about the culture, the people, the community, and we're very excited to be a part of it.
Mhm.
Jorge, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit more about your background, your childhood. Tell us a little more about where you grew up and what kind of brought you to where you are now.
Yeah, so Philadelphia is my hometown. I just returned about 5 months ago. We were just chatting about that before we started here, and
Go Eagles!
yeah, go birds.
I'm not
Yeah,
gonna I'm
we're
not gonna make
super
you spell
excited.
it out because under
No, that's
pressure,
controversial. That's
people might spell
controversial.
it differently, but no.
Yeah, I love the fandom here. No doubt, the energy and the spirit here has been fantastic. And so yeah, I grew up in Philadelphia. And I there are kind of two parts to my family history that I think are important that also define kind of who I am as a leader. Um, my family, from both sides, my mom and my dad's side, migrated from Puerto Rico, um, starting in the 40s and 50s, and there's a lot we know now about specific policy that actually displaced many families, but also created opportunities for people who were looking to have a better life, kind of the American dream, right? Puerto Rico in that period was turning over from an agricultural society to something more industrial, and that displaced a lot of families. But the opportunity that my family gained was to grow in an area that of the city. So um, downtown Philadelphia in that period was underinvested in, but over the years there was a lot more investment that came into the city, and I benefited from that. I benefited from being in a growing up in a zip code where I had access to better infrastructure, better schools. My parents sacrificed to send me to private school. And yeah, I think those are some of the most important and influential parts of my life that were informed by my parents' decisions, so that I could get a better education, so that I could live a more healthy life. Um,
I know you've been,
yeah,
know you're
yeah.
a runner now. Were you always a runner? Did you enjoy running when you were
Yeah.
younger or?
I started running in high school. I was not athletic, but I did end up joining the crew team, the lightweight novice crew
Oh.
team, in college for a year, which was fun. But yeah, no, running has been both meaningful from a health perspective and then also from a meditative perspective.
Hmm.
I'm that guy that likes to run without music.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great way for me to reset.
That's good. You've already mentioned several ways that you are working on bettering yourself and healing and
Yeah,
meditating and centering, and I love that. That says a lot about you, and you do have a very calming presence, so it all seems to be
thank
working.
you.
And you mentioned a lot of really interesting things there, probably a lot to choose from, but I wanted to ask, is there a story from your early years growing up that really, now looking back, they've shaped you and who you are and what you do?
Oh gosh. Yeah, like I can remember as a kid being super freaked out by the depleting ozone layer
Mm.
Oh,
and the contribution that greenhouse gases would have. So much so that I refused to have an air conditioner in my room growing up
oh wow.
because I knew that CFCs were contributing to the depleting ozone layer. So like I had a high consciousness about,
And a high
how,
tolerance.
sorry, and a high tolerance, yeah, and a high tolerance for heat. Yeah, I had some consciousness around like what was happening in the world, and then looked for ways that I could, contribute to the betterment of it. My family also, so I grew up here, and so much of the culture of Puerto Rican families is to migrate together. So I grew up around a lot of family, and we grew a lot of our own food. We had many trees in the backyard. I had an apple tree growing up that my mom had to figure out how to basically what to do with the surplus every year. And so we got really creative with making applesauce and cakes and things like that. But seeing my father and my aunts and uncles really working with the land, we were fortunate to have a backyard, and there was actually a community garden that the family was very engaged in. And those things are still happening. We still
Yeah.
work to maintain those lots. And so I think that has absolutely influenced my understanding of like sustainability.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, and a very interesting story, right? Early on in your career. And so I know that you went on to study a BSc in marketing from the Wharton School, and you also finished a master's degree from NYU Stern School of Business. Tell us a little more about your career and how this educational experiences, first going from marketing to then business, how did you tie all that together with your experience in Philadelphia and
Hmm.
your immigrant family that kind of gave you the tools needed for what you're currently doing, and in particular, why driving
Yeah,
social impact? What kind of caught your attention when it came to
yeah.
helping others?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. I mean, I kind of fell into marketing and market research. It was a career that um, felt to me complemented my interests. I was nerdy and I loved to do research and statistics, and so there was that part. But also, I started in a sector that was also about client service, and so in studying the different categories and sectors of business, I started to evaluate, excuse me, those companies that were doing better than others. So, for example, I worked regionally. It was very exciting, right? Like I worked on clients like Hers potato chips and Sherman bread and Turkey Hill ice cream. Really great for a hometown like Philadelphia kid to like be working with these heritage regional Over time, though, I started to work with larger companies in the beverage category and in pharmaceuticals. And I could start to understand, not just from a marketing perspective, who was doing well and gaining share, but also whose practices were maybe better
Absolutely.
for the world. So I think those early experiences helped me to navigate the private sector in a way to try and find a link between like my values and feeling good about the work that I was doing. So I think that partially answers your question. You asked also about sort of like how that all came together, Enrique. And I think I would point to my experience teaching, actually. So for about a decade prior to joining B Lab, I was in the classroom and I designed a course at the Bard MBA and Sustainability program called Stakeholders in Marketing.
Wow.
And I was spending a lot of time thinking about how the discipline really could be very influential in sustainability if it understood how to persuade the many stakeholders in the value chain, right? We get taught traditionally that marketers, in the most simple sense, our role is to grow the business and sell more to more people more often at the highest price, right? That's capitalism at its best.
Right.
That's capitalism at its best. What it doesn't teach us is how those kinds of decisions affect the rest of the supply chain or the communities or the environment. And I think that's the opportunity that the discipline really has.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were certainly an early adopter, and I love that you were also teaching that to others, what you were learning that speaks very much to who you are and being able to spread that message, and makes perfect sense now at this new phase in your career. So you worked with these major companies, always fascinating being in market, and market research is a totally different aspect of marketing as well. So you were able to see such interesting facets behind these brand names that you knew. You founded a company, you worked in the classroom, you have a great depth and breadth of knowledge, and that has led you to B Lab U.S. in Canada, where it's beautiful because you do have all these experiences and are able to empathize on so many levels with companies that are certifying and have seen it grow. As you said, the last 4 years double in size, which is incredible. And so being able to be a part of that and understand stakeholder capitalism from a completely different angle than probably a lot of us walked into. So I love that. So first of all, even though we talk about it a lot on this podcast and have had a lot of amazing guests, of course, we have to have you talk about what is B Corp. So tell us about B Lab, B Corp. Just give us the overview for those who are unaware.
Sure. I'll start by saying that B Corps we consider to be the beacons for what it means for a company to operate with profit and purpose at the center. So B Lab, so I think this is important to always say, because we're all still learning this ecosystem. B Lab is the nonprofit engine behind B Corps, and B Lab is a standards organization. B Lab U.S. in Canada is the organization that nurtures the community of companies that now is around 2,500 strong in both the U.S. and Canada. And so for the companies that choose to pursue certification and succeed, they use our B Corp logo. They get to use the B Corp logo to promote themselves as better than the rest. And it's a real competitive advantage in a world of labels, right? So if you think about, fair trade for coffee or LEED for the built environment, those are other certifications that a company can choose to pursue. B Corps and the B Lab standards are the most comprehensive, in fact, and many of those other existing standards feed into it.
Yeah.
It's also important to say, there's a couple definitions that I think might be helpful. So B Lab started as a performance standard, and that was really the first decade of B Lab, establishing a performance standard that demonstrates how a company not only reports on what it does, but also demonstrates continuous improvement a key characteristic of B Corps, and then also does so with transparency and with accountability. So those are the three principles of B Corps. The next 10 years was establishing the legal requirement. And I think this is one of the more interesting things about the movement, as we call it today, is that being a B Corp is not just about a set of standards of performance, but in fact, we are locking in the mission. We are locking in our charters what it means to ensure that boards of directors and management are making decisions for the benefit of all stakeholders, not just shareholders. And this is a huge shift that B Lab has been a pioneer around, helping to evaluate and prove that business can, and in fact now is required to think about stakeholders and move away from shareholder primacy.
Yes, thank you for explaining that. You did a great job. I remember going through the onboarding and I was like taking notes feverishly as you were talking because you did such a good job of explaining it very clearly and concisely and made it easy to understand. And I think also giving those examples for other things people may be aware of, fair trade or LEED or something like that, is super helpful because as we know, B Corp is growing and isn't as big as some of those others, but encompasses so much more. And so I think it's great to help shed light on those. And I remember like walking into the conference and I felt like it was kind of one of those, like I was reminded of the movie Elf because I just wanted to walk in and be like, you did it, you did it.
I just saw that movie for the first time this season.
Oh my
It was
gosh,
so
It's a
fun.
good
Oh,
movie.
it's so good. It's
I
so
know what you
good.
mean. I know what you
Yes.
mean.
Everybody
Yeah,
just needed it. Like
yeah.
we should have had greeters at the door that just pat people on the back and just thank you for making it this far. It was so great. But you talked about it went through an incredible growth period in the last couple of years. There was also, of course, it was all one entity that is now multiple global entities. So tell us a few of the things that you're most proud of as you've been able to witness it these last 4 years.
Yeah, I've thankfully, I feel really grateful for the work of our team at B Lab U.S. in Canada, because we're one of the first things that I got to do was to establish a new function within the organization that evaluated what we call programs that would help B Corps build the roadmaps towards this future that we all envision, right? We talk about ourselves as an economic systems change organization. And in my first 90 days of going on a listening tour with B Corps, what I heard was we want B Lab to model the change. Mm. And we want B Lab to help us build the roadmaps for how to achieve this future, right? That is equitable, regenerative, and inclusive. And that was a really powerful insight to me, because I understood at that time that the community of companies that we call B Corps were no longer asking why we should be doing it, but saying like, we want to figure out how do we do this together? And so our role has been very much about creating the conditions for building communities of practice to learn from each other. One of the most recent examples of that is our climate finance community of practice. And so in May of 2024, about 40 companies participated in a 4-week program to move their investments and assets to low carbon intensive investments. So what that looked like is the companies understanding the climate finance basics, looking for climate friendly banks, for those that might also be looking for minority deposit institutions as well to ensure that their monies are being invested in communities and locally, looking at their employee retirement plan and 401ks, so much money in 401ks. How do you green your 401ks, right? Kind of learning from the past phases of SRI investment or screenings to more conscious ESG investment. And so that cohort of companies combined have something like billion in assets and investments that they continue, having gone through the 4-week course, are now working through the implementation plan. And it's been super interesting to learn from the work, because I think while the roadmaps are now being built for how to do this, and we're looking forward to expand that kind of program, what's also true is that mindsets are a barrier. Our CFOs might be the other frontier, aside from marketers that I so adore, because I was one. But our CFOs play a really key decision-making role in helping to steward climate-friendly investments. And so we're really excited about that. We talked about the growth of the community. The community is really adapting, and we're using the data from the B impact assessment to understand and tell stories about the ways in which companies are creating more equitable practices in their companies. We have an impact improvement program focused on how companies can adopt fair wage practices, wealth building practices, look at initiatives like open hiring to lower the barriers of access to employment. Looking at fair wage which is a significant part of the next evolution of our standards. I'm not sure if we're going to talk about that today, but certainly a big evolution in the way that our standards hold up to what it means to be a B Corp. And then last but not least, I'll just come back to the team at B Lab U.S. and Canada. We're about 40 people today. So we're a small and mighty team. Globally, we have about 500 employees. So there is a global workforce that we get to connect with on a day-to-day basis. But we've taken a close look at our own policies and how we support our own team. And so we've got some long-time, loyal employees who now get to benefit from sabbatical leave every 4 and 10 years, for example. And that's unusual, right? Sabbatical is something we typically only hear of in the academic setting.
Yep.
And I think most recently we're really proud of and now known for our 4-day work week, which has been a fascinating experiment with a lot of benefits.
Wow, that's very interesting. I mean, we love culture, and we love talking about companies that are being creative and innovative in terms of how they manage their teams and organization. And as you pointed out, Jorge, and thanks for sharing, you guys have gone from a performance standard, which you clearly are right now, and then it's not only a certification for people that are listening to us right now, because you went on and then actually did something that most certifications I know of, at least, haven't really done or been able to accomplish, which is tackling the legal requirements and basically moving into policy, because every B Corp has to change their operating agreements to make sure that they're aligned with the values and the purpose of the community and the stakeholders, not only the shareholders. And that's incredible. And it sounds to me that maybe with you leading, the next step will be achieving the future and shaping that path so that the community itself can come together and really accomplish this transformation. So it's very, very exciting. So
it is exciting. Yeah, it might be an opportunity to talk a little bit about the evolution of our standards, right? Because embedded in that is what you just said, Enrique, which is that first, we are a global standard, right? So 10,000 companies globally are, the number of certified B Corps and growing, are looking to meet a new set of requirements in the next 3 to 5 years, which is very, very different from what was created almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the simple way that I think about it is that we're moving from, evaluating a company's impact on stakeholders in 5 dimensions to a set of minimum requirements across 10 impact topics that basically say what B Corps stand for as a community, as a whole. And I think that's a really interesting thing to sit with when we think about policy. Because in order to be effective in policy, you need a collective of companies that are working together to achieve a common outcome.
Right.
And up to now, the standards have have allowed and helped companies achieve their certification in a multitude of ways that we are now learning from. But we're saying that the future is different, that we're all going to be working more in a common fashion. And I think that is the foundation for a new kind of impact that does help us contribute to policy change around the world.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think that to your point, the way we work changes, the community changes. And I think B Corps are really good, and B Lab and the certification in itself, it's a living process, right? So something
Yes.
that you measured 20 years ago cannot be the same thing that you're measuring now. And so it's, again, refreshing to see, as you said, 10,000 plus companies come together and say, we got to keep evolving, right? We have to
That's right.
recertify. It's not something that you certify once and then move on. You have to keep committing yourself to really making a positive change in the world. Going back to you for a little bit though, Jorge, what kind of leadership style kind of can manage both things, or some of the, maybe if you could give us some suggestions for people that are listening out there? I mean, you're leading this amazing organization with a lot of like-minded companies, but they're still in very different industries, in very different parts and regions of the world. How do you actually manage that, and how do you have how do you approach leadership when it comes to performance, which I know you guys do, and the certification's not a, it's not a walk in the park, as Kristi was saying. It's an elf moment at the end of the certification. How do you make that happen so that you can have performance and also have purpose at the same time? What kind of ideas or suggestions would you give to people listening to us?
Yeah, I mean, as a leader of a nonprofit, this is my first nonprofit gig, by the way, just to say it, right? Like I actually, so, but also, we do operate, like a business. We benefit from the corporate structure, and we raise money with philanthropy, and we get to make investments that allow us to spend our, in a different way than having, what a for-profit has to do, right? So that's the benefits of being in a nonprofit structure. I think I approach this work, or at least I try to, with a sense of humility. I was not in the B Corp community prior to joining, and that to some might have advantages, and to others maybe some disadvantages. I of course knew of the B Corp certification, I just wasn't in it, and so that required me to really take a posture of listening, from the start, and learning from the team. And by the way, it was in the middle of, the COVID and pandemic times. And so I joined virtually, and I hadn't met anyone on the team in person. And so it was like, kind of a weird way to join an organization. So as a leader, maybe the benefit of like this, Zoom environment was to sharpen my listening skills. I think what you're pointing to, Enrique, makes me think about, the complexities of what it means to manage different stakeholders in an environment where, first and foremost, our team and the well-being of our team was priority number one when I came in, because like many organizations in the pandemic, teams were burnt out. And so how do we address that in a good way? And so we've spent a lot of time understanding what would be good for our team in order to sustain themselves in this work. And then, of course, we have this growing community who I've gotten to know. And it's a pretty diverse, group of companies from across the country, the U.S. and in Canada, with different expectations of us, and a desire to often have a voice in what B Lab does. And I think that's been really interesting to see such a high level of engagement with our community. So yeah, I think it's just been really important to stay in a posture of listening, and to know that not only are we trying to raise the bar with our product offering, but also the dynamics around us externally are creating a lot of pressure, right? We can look outside the US, right? Look at the EU and the development of the regulations that are coming and how that impacts our community worldwide, and how that maybe also gives an advantage to the standards, and in fact helps us to reinforce the value of what's being created. On the other hand, there's a lot of anti stuff, right? There's a lot of anti ESG, a lot of anti DEI, a lot of anti LGBTQ. If you saw me on the road last year, you would hear me jokingly say, the alphabet is under attack. It was kind of a crazy moment. And now, I think from a US perspective, our hopes for policy change are pretty low, right?
Right. At least for
But
the time being, right?
at least for the time being. So we just being humble about that, right? Being like really clear-eyed about what we can influence and when. But I still believe that our strongest asset continues to be our community, and listening to how we navigate this moment is going to allow us to get through.
So are you, and I was going to ask you probably this a little bit later, but so for the next couple of years or foreseeable future, you think some of these initiatives will take like a backseat, or you think that this will probably prompt our community to fight even harder? What do
Yeah,
you think will the future, and I know no one really knows, especially now with the
yeah.
politicians we have in power, but what is your gut feel about the future and how this community is going to react to some of the realities that we're living and will have to go through?
Yeah. I mean, I think to the extent that we believe ourselves a community that's in a movement, we can say that we've been here before, and we can learn from the past, and that it's important for us to stay the course, and to find ways to be resilient and support each other, knowing that no company and no leader needs to stand alone. That's what I look for.
Absolutely.
When things around us get a little cray cray, and there's a high level of uncertainty, I look for community, and that's what I would expect of our B Corp community.
Yeah, I want to summarize real quick before moving on. You talk about being in leadership role and humility and listening and not standing alone. And I think those are things that leaders in general, whether you're a management level leader or you're founder, CEO level, C-suite, anybody in some sort of leadership position really struggles to, because you have people asking you and you feel like you're supposed to know the answers. And so I feel like there's probably internally a lot of turmoil with people when they get asked questions and don't know the answers. And so I feel like that's a really strong, healthy approach to go with humility. And I don't know the answer. Let's talk about that. Let's learn in community. Let's, brainstorm solutions. I think that's a much better way forward for leadership than trying to stand alone and leading to burnout and depression and all the things that
Yeah,
we see over time. So I appreciate you pointing those
yeah.
aspects out.
Thank you, Kristi. Yeah, it's a helpful summary. Also, there's some more emerging work around cultural humility, which you might be interested in. Yeah,
Yeah.
that I think informs that kind of leadership.
Yeah. Well, of course, I can't let you get away without talking marketing, since that is
Okay.
my area as well. So marketing, like everything that you've worked in, and just like our world, has just changed so dramatically. How have you also, you mentioned you're at a nonprofit, not highly known for their innovation and technological advances and marketing, and so you bring that aspect with you to B Lab. And so how have you integrated or just thought through marketing and technology as you move this organization forward, and whether it's challenges or solutions?
Yeah, I think our programmatic work is the most exciting. I'll say that as a marketer who has operated in organizations with portfolios, we, to your point, mm, might benefit from having a deeper, stronger portfolio set.
Sure.
And I say that not, I say that for a lot of reasons, right? Companies have portfolios because they look to diversify, and they look to have a competitive advantage and gain share. That's not our approach, right? That's why we're all about impact.
Mhm.
So when we think about programs or product offerings, we're thinking about those same roadmaps that I've spoken to so far, whether it's the climate finance business cohort guide, or the principles for climate, or our racial equity impact improvement work. Those kinds of offerings are really now at a stage where we can codify those, and we're thinking about how to scale them, right? That's my marketing hat kind of kicking in. Okay, how do we structure this offering? Do we charge? Do we not charge? Can we get philanthropy funding? Like, there is still a revenue model attached to this that we need to continuously evaluate as we look to put more investment from our team. So I think that's our biggest opportunity. And I know globally, this is a priority for us.
Yeah.
Because whether or not you pursue B Corp certification, there's high interest in adopting elements of our standards. And I think that's a real opportunity for us to continue to pursue.
Mhm.
Absolutely. You mentioned, Jorge, some of the publications that B Lab actually conducts and now has the opportunity to review, and you have a lot of information, so they're getting even more valuable and more relevant for the community as you grow the community itself. You mentioned one, climate finance guide, and very shortly, it basically says, and this came to as a surprise to me as well, and as our company, you actually go through the process, you certify as a B Corp, but then you also have to consider, well, what are you doing with the money, right? So you have banks, you have other financial institutions, you have insurance companies, and it never really occurred to me until reading the climate finance guide that, well, that is important, because at the end of the day, you are giving the money to other institutions that may or may not be aligned, most likely not be aligned with the values, with the sustainability that you're predicating as a B Corp. So how could you, I mean, if you could give us one key insight, or how do we, companies or owners out there, how do they start thinking about this, looking into aligning their finances with climate-friendly practices and purpose-driven cultures?
Yeah. I mean, I think one way to think about the money aspect of where our investments lie is to think about Scope 3 emissions in our supply chain. And so, the financial services sector especially, but also many companies have, millions, billions, trillions of dollars in assets. So in total, the 6 largest banks have something like $1.8 trillion that are actually currently investing in or supporting or financing fossil fuels, right? And so just looking at that number requires us to really take a step back to say, if we are to create the kind of change that we're imagining, we've got to move our money and align it with our values. And it can't be ignored, right? We can do a lot with respect to supply chain and company practices, but as a whole, looking at finance is important too. Amongst the cohort, I've shared a story recently. There's a B Corp company called Grain, and their co-founder, Chelsea Manola, shared that they were able to successfully move their money to one of the top 4 U.S. banks. That also happens to be a B Corp, by the way, Beneficial State Bank. And so there's lots of ways to think about how to create this reinforcing economic impact by looking at the kinds of companies within our own community that would benefit from that. We have also a number of CDFIs, community development financial institutions, that are B Corp certified, that I think we should continue to evaluate how do we move money in that direction. That's one really important example. And something you said, Enrique, is important to come back to, which is that the guide has been designed for B Corps to engage in better practices to create that kind of impact. But in fact, we've seen interest from non-B Corps also. So this, to me, also changes the game.
Yeah.
Because if we can become a movement that is embracing of companies, whether or not you're B Corp certified, but are working towards the same impact and outcome, to me, that is even more powerful than what we have right now. Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
And it's important, right? Because at the end of the day, it's literally putting the money where your mouth is. Because you
Literally.
can't
Yes.
fight. So on one hand,
Yeah.
on one hand, you're really trying to change things, let's call sustainability or equality. And on the other, you're giving the money to companies that are turning around and then financing fossil fuel projects. So you're
Yeah.
trying to help, but you're also contributing to the problem by
Yeah.
not being aware of this massive
Yeah.
impact that the
Yeah.
money matters, right? And where you put it matters. And I think conscious leaders and conscious companies, purpose-driven companies, should
Yeah.
be aware of.
I want to give a shout out to Seventh Generation here, under the leadership of their most recent CEO, who's now left, Alison Rittenauer. They did what's called a climate finance blueprint, or climate blueprint, that looked exactly at this, like where their investments were. It's publicly available. It's an important read for any company who's thinking about this.
Wow.
Knowing
We'll
that a
add all
large
those
company like Seventh
links.
Generation, yeah, great.
We'll
Yeah.
we'll add all those links to our interview, so that when we post it, people can just go and click on those links. And thanks for the recommendation, the shout out. And of course, if you have any other shout outs, please go ahead, because I know that there's a
Yeah.
lot of really good people that are helping on this particular aspect, and then also on a lot of others. So thanks, Jorge.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think one key aspect that we just touched on that was it's such a helpful part of being in this community and just being taking the assessment is awareness. Some of things that we've just never been exposed to or thought
Right.
of or looked at. And so it was really interesting to me when we started this process, just reading and knowing that hundreds of thousands of companies have taken the assessment just to see where they benchmark. They may not be interested in pursuing. It may just be an awareness tool of where they stand, where they want to improve. So we highly recommend just people who are semi-curious to take the assessment. But I think that was really encouraging just to know that as you're now seeing in a completely different way, people are just curious as to where they stand and wanting to make an impact and wanting that awareness to be able to
Yeah.
improve.
Yeah, you're right, Kristi. Yeah, something close to 300,000 companies have access to the impact assessment, a free open
Wow.
source tool that any company can start, to understand how to assess themselves. And I think, you pointed this out, but I think what's also true is that, our assessment for so many companies now has proven to be a way to assess risk,
Mm,
but also to look at where you can create value. Because to the extent that the assessment creates a roadmap for where you can improve, then that's where the real value is, I think.
absolutely. Well, as we wrap up, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time. We've really enjoyed this conversation and continuing to learn more about this community. And yeah, everybody that you talk to in the community just has such great stories, has such great insight. There's so much to learn from and just collective wisdom. So as we wrap up, one of the questions that you probably get asked a lot and we have wondered ourselves is, first of all, should every company pursue a B Corp certification?
I'll answer that by saying that if we spent our lifetime looking to get every company to become a B Corp, we would not be able to achieve our vision of the future.
Mm,
That's not to dissuade any company from
sure.
pursuing certification. That's just to help us think differently about what the role of standards and certification is and how we might achieve that vision sooner.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then finally, what are a couple of, from your experience, from your listening tour that you did, what are a couple of the greatest ROI aspects of the certification?
Well, I think that we're in a really interesting moment right now as we bridge between version 6 of our standards and the evolution of our standards. ROI, admittedly, is a tricky thing. I'm going to be honest here, right? That's the holy grail of the sustainability field.
Yes.
So I'm not going to start telling you all of the things that demonstrate ROI for a company that pursues certification, because a lot of the benefits, as we know them today, are intangible.
Mm.
But I think what's true about the growing demand for certification has been the push from a new generation of workers to demand something different from their employers. And so, to the extent that the competition for talent is and will continue to be a challenge for any company, I think that's an ROI worth betting on that
Absolutely.
supports attracting and retaining talent.
Yeah.
There's also real. This goes back to my point about the way the BIA, or the B Impact Assessment, helps companies assess their risk and also value. And for any company that's looking to be financed or to get access to capital, having going through the BIA, again, whether or not you certify,
Mhm.
creates value
Yeah.
that helps you understand how to build that stronger business case for financing. And I think that those are two high order returns on investment, so to speak. Harder to quantify,
Sure.
but absolutely help to deliver on the expectations of leaders today who know that workers are looking for this and investors are looking to evaluate their business models for sustainability risk.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Well, and very recently, Annie Agel told us that the return is really in the long term. And then also she said that, of course, doing the right thing is not cheap, right? It is
So
hard.
I believe
Doing the
that.
right things is hard. And so it doesn't mean that we don't have to do them. And for me and my company, I believe that the easier way to measure the return on things like this is that we will probably we're more likely to be here 10 years from now because we are a B Corp and because we have a purpose-driven company. So when the ROI is still exist or go bankrupt, I feel like you might not be able to very, very clearly pinpoint what it is or the amount of money that it actually is on that ROI calculation, but going bankrupt's always worse than just staying in business. So
Yeah.
consumers in the future will prefer to work with companies that are not destroying our planet. I think that's a very easy, I guess, assumption to make. And so, Jorge, thank you so much for what you
Mhm.
do. Thank you for leading
Thank
this
you, Enrique.
amazing
Thank you,
organization.
Kristi.
You have our full support, as I'm sure you have the support of all the more than 10,000 companies out there. And it's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for what you do.
Well,
How
thank
can
you
our
for diving in to the
Yeah.
community
No,
and
it's a
inviting me
pleasure.
onto
Well,
your podcast.
a pleasure being
Yeah,
here. And how can our listeners connect to you? How can they learn a little bit more about B Lab US
sure.
and Canada?
Sure. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn if you'd like. And we are bcorps.com, actually, is the easiest way to find us. We are bcorps.com.
Get
Fantastic.
certified. Get at least, if not certified, just do the assessment. I think it's a really good strategic thing to do for your companies.
Yeah. And
Agreed.
as consumers, I know one of the fun things internally that our team has had is just that realization of when you're making dinner and looking through your pantry, you're like, oh my gosh, it's a B Corp. And it's just such a fun realization to see that label on something that you've purchased and have a better understanding of what that means. So, yes, we support you. Are grateful for all the work that you do, you and your team. It's a lot. It's growing, and congratulations on all the success. And we look forward to learning from you and continuing that effort in the future. And for everybody who's listening, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And if you liked this episode, then be sure to subscribe because we'll have another great one in 2 weeks.